What's up YouTube? It is Ben with Bearded Spruce back for another DIY tutorial video. Today we are in my friend's house. They asked me to build some custom floating shelves for them. I'm pretty excited about how these turned out and how they're going to turn out when we mount them on the wall. But we are in this beautiful brand new kitchen and we're going to install some shelves. You're probably watching this video because you're wondering how to do this correctly. I've done them in the past before I knew how bad it was and how much it was horrible once it was installed. I just anchored, some floating shelves, either a kit from IKEA or from Amazon, onto the drywall, thinking, hey, it says it's rated for 150 pounds. I'll just use these drywall anchors that come with it. And if you have done the same thing, you know the outcome. Pretty much right away, things start to sag. Basically what is happening is the weight of the shelf and what is on the shelf will actually compress the bottom of the drywall, and so it will kind of create a cantilever over time. Eventually you'll just have to take them off and redo it, and it's such a bummer because you spent so much time making it level and all that kind of stuff. Today we're going to go over how to do it correctly. Fortunately, our friends that wanted these shelves put up knew ahead of time that they wanted to have me do this. So being new construction, I came in and measured out exactly where we wanted them, and I added some additional 2x4 support in addition to what's typically there of 16 on center. When you do it yourself, you're probably not going to have the added benefit of adding these extra 2x4s, so you'll want to plan out the size of your shelves accordingly to span at least two 2x4s, which are typically 16 inches on center. Let's go over some equipment really quick that we'll need for this project. Of course, you need the shelves. For this project, I went and got some rough sawn lumber and then milled them down myself to be the perfect size, which is 1.75 inches thick. These are 18 inches wide by about 11 inches deep to fit perfectly into this spot behind me. This is the hardware that we're going to be using today. I will link to all of these individual pieces of equipment down in the affiliate links below. Speaking of affiliate links, if you want to support me, that is a great way to support my videos. A lot of you guys have already done that in my past videos, and I really appreciate it. It really fuels me to continue to do these videos and to show you guys some little tips and tricks on how to do things around the house. I'm also working on a 1972 Airstream, and to add to the crazy, finessing, adding to some cool stuff on a 1982 vintage trailer as well. So feel free to check out my other videos on my channel. But back to today. So we're gonna use these. They do come with, like I mentioned before, drywall anchors, which I think is hilarious. Please don't use these unless you absolutely have to. But these are 1/2 inch in diameter anchors that connect to the 2x4. And you can see it's wider at the bottom than it is at the top. And we're going to anchor these directly to the 2x4. These, I believe, are 6 inches long, and so we'll have to drill holes in this that are equal or a little bit longer than that. To do so, we're going to use this super long, crazy looking bit. This is a 1/2 inch bore bit. Again, I'll link in the description below. To do that, you'll need a pretty high powered drill. This is my favorite one as of late. I just got this one a few months ago and really enjoy it. You'll also need a drywall cutter. This is probably the easiest way to do this method, but you could use an X-Acto knife and kind of scrape it out if you choose to. Of course, a tape measure, a level. We will need a stud finder because we need to know where these are. Some tape, painter's tape, and then to go along with this bit, there's a jig so you know that you're centering the drill bit. We'll go over all of this in a few minutes when we start the process. I like to use a sledgehammer because you'll see in a little bit, it's pretty snug once you get it all in place. Then you need some screws of choice. I'm using some interior screws that I like. The other thing that we need to talk about is safety equipment. So like I say in all my videos, make sure that you're being careful and protected. So I have eye protection. And then my new choice in ear protection are these Beats. I'm gonna do a full review on what these are like for woodworkers because I think ear protection is extremely important, like we all know, and at the same time, I really want to be listening to music or a podcast or something like that. So unfortunately, I lost my old ones, but it gave me an excuse to get some new ones. So all that to say, let's jump into the project. First thing we're gonna do is measure things out. I okayed all the measurements and the spacing with the homeowner. And so I'm gonna mark that with some masking tape and then we'll jump to the next section. First thing I did was measure for this corner, which is going to define all of the shelves. So we're gonna start on the bottom first on this one. And basically what I did is we wanted to match a different spacing on another part of the kitchen. So we're 7 inches over from this tile edge and then 5 inches up from this tile edge. And since this is a new build, things are actually pretty spot on in terms of level, which is unique. But if things aren't super level, you have two choices. You can either make it level and then just kind of deal with the fact that everything else kind of looks wonky, or you can match, you know, from the backsplash or something like that. This is perfectly level, so I didn't have to worry about it, but that's kind of a real world scenario where you're not always gonna have a perfectly level scenario for installation. Now that we have things pretty much marked out, I made sure that this line is completely level, and then we're going to put the shelf, the first shelf, right above that line. So like I mentioned before, I put new studs in here. So we're gonna find those and mark exactly where they are so we know where to cut. But you wanna use a stud finder, and then I always make sure using the sound test. One thing to note when you're hanging these shelves is you don't want to get too close to the edge with the hole, since it is a 1/2 inch. You can go probably 1 inch in at minimum, but you don't want to go too much closer to the edge because you chance splitting the wood. Okay, so I found the studs. You can see I did a little mark on each side. Now we're going to trace this guy, and you want him to be level as possible, and then the hope is that it will land on a stud once we cut out the drywall. So I'm gonna keep that as level as possible and trace around with my pen, and I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, and then we're gonna cut out the drywall. We're gonna use this multi-tool to cut, and this is just the blade that came with it. It does produce a lot of sawdust, so feel free to wear a mask. I also always cover up the counter in this situation to avoid as much dust and that kind of stuff getting on the counter. We're gonna pop our headphones in, and I'm gonna cut out this side, and then we'll do the next. I turned down the volume a little bit. It is quite noisy. You do want some ear protection, like I mentioned before, as well as eye protection, because you never know what's going to happen. You will notice that as I'm going in, I stop pretty quickly once I feel something, which is the stud behind it. If your blade goes too far in, then you know that you missed the stud, and you probably need to re-measure. Alright, so let's see how we did. The stud is right behind there. There's actually a vapor barrier that I tried not to disturb, so that is a stud right behind there, so we're good to go on that one. So let's install this side, and then we'll move on to the other side. This mounting hardware comes with screws and that kind of stuff. Typically they're trash and they always fail on me or break, so I typically just grab my own stuff. So we're gonna mount this with some screws. You'll see that the big part is on the bottom. So make sure it fits in there nice and snug. And then we're going to screw that in. All right, and that is very sturdy. Each one of these shelves is going to be rated to about 300 pounds. I think it's safe to say that this is not going anywhere anytime soon. So I'm going to move on to do the same thing on this side, and then we'll come back and show how to install that shelf itself. Now that we have both of the mounting hardware secure, these things are super solid. We're going to double check for level. You'll see it's perfectly level. So now we're going to mark the wood. The way we do that is we take the shelf and we make sure it's exactly where we want it. And then we're going to mark the side just right where the center of these posts are. And then we're going to go in the garage. All right, so basically what we're gonna do is use this jig to make sure we're in the center. We're going to translate the hash mark to the back of the piece of wood, that one, as well as, and then the biggest hole here is actually the 1/2 inch. So we're going to center it on that hole. Make sure it's nice and tight. And then you'll notice that I marked the bit with the depth of how far I want to go down. Basically what you have to do is you have to measure the length of the shaft that's going into the wood and then add this depth here. So measure it all and then translate that to the tip of the drill bit back here. And it's okay if you go a little longer than you need to, but you just want to make sure you get in there enough without going all the way through it, obviously. So I'm going to drill this hole. You'll notice that I put some paper on the floor, and then you basically sandwich it between your feet. And you want to start out nice and slow. First hole, another side, and then we'll be ready to install. Alright, so now you have 2 holes that should be all set to go, and let's go install the shelf. So now that we have the holes drilled like we just did in the garage, they should line up perfectly. The hardware, everything looks pretty good. So now you might need a sledgehammer and a piece of paper towel or a cloth or something like that. Sometimes you get lucky and you can just slide it right in. Line up both holes. It takes a little bit of finagling. All right, so once you get both of the posts in the holes, you just kind of push it back. This is where you want some kind of mallet. Basically, once you get this thing on, it is solid as a rock, so it's okay that it's a little snug. If it needs a little extra encouragement, I just get a clean towel. It's like a scrap towel, and just kind of go on both sides until it's flush. Drywall. It is flush with the drywall and it is solid. So there will be, just like any shelf, some flex. I don't know if you can see it. There is some flex, but it will never sag like typical floating shelves. So it's okay that it flexes. This thing can carry a lot of weight. It's nice and flush with the drywall, and then we'll take all the tape off. And then I did bring a little caulk. You can barely see it, but I always bring some caulk because a little bit of the drywall is always a little bit, you know, cracked or something. And you can see perfectly installed floating shelf. Now we're gonna put the other two up, and then we'll be back to wrap up this video. We are wrapped up with this project. As you can see, I did space them out. I did 11 inches in between each one, so basically 12 inches on center. And then we matched the cabinet spacing over there, so everything should look very symmetrical. And then everything is perfectly aligned and level. And then you can go around and touch up paint if you need to, but for the most part it should be pretty seamless and ready to put stuff on. Like I said before, they do flex a little bit, but they can hold a ton of weight. Now you might be asking, how did I make these shelves? These were from rough sawn lumber at a lumber store. If you want to do something like this, you want to start with about 2-inch thick wood, and then you're going to mill it down with some different technique that'll go in another video. But this video was just about hanging these, and they are solid and ready to go. You can, if there's any gaps, go back with some caulking to make it look seamless, but this installation was actually pretty close to perfect. I did touch up a few spots here and there. Like always, thanks for joining. I appreciate all of you guys. If you're still watching this, feel free to subscribe and like my videos. It helps me a ton, and we will see you next time.